In March of 2026, an airline flight attendant who was strapped into a jump seat was violently ejected 300 feet from an exploding aircraft.
Right onto an active runway.
Yeah, onto a New York runway, and she miraculously survived, which is just unbelievable. And on that exact same weekend, a totally routine vasectomy turned into this bizarre medical thriller when doctors realized the patient had a completely hidden second kidney.
It was a very weird week in history, to say the least.
It really was. And today we're taking a deep dive into a time capsule from that exact week. Because, if you were burying a time capsule for future historians to find, you would probably put in, like a major newspaper?
Like maybe a list of significant events or a pristine piece of new tech.
Exactly. You'd want it to be this clean, carefully curated summary of the era.
Which is the instinct. Historically, yes. You want your era to look official and organized. But, that curated approach usually strips away all the actual messy human context.
Yeah.
What's really fascinating here is that if you actually want to understand what a specific moment in time felt like, you shouldn't just look at official documents. You should listen to people talking when they think history isn't listening.
And that is exactly what we are looking at today. So welcome to the deep dive. We are exploring a highly unique source for you today. It's a broadcast from March 29th, 2026 of a comedic, just very conversational radio show called Past Week, Next Week.
It is the absolute definition of an audio time capsule. Because on the surface, it's really just a group of friends sharing goofy stories, bantering, complaining about their weekends.
Right, just casual chatter.
Exactly.
Hey.
But our mission for this deep dive is to actively sift through all that casual, sometimes chaotic conversation. Because buried inside the jokes and the random tangents are some incredibly sharp, totally factual nuggets about the political landscape, the cultural shifts, and just the daily realities of 2026.
We are going to take you on a journey today that goes from bizarre medical anomalies and deeply frustrating infrastructure failures all the way to tense global geopolitics, internet culture clashes, and finally
finding some semblance of logical order.
Yes, finding order in the tactical restructuring of the Kansas City Chiefs.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, a clear theme actually emerges right away from this source. The micro-level issues these hosts are experiencing in their personal lives totally mirror the massive macro-level breakdowns happening in the world around them.
It's so true.
So the broadcast starts with personal systems, specifically the sheer unpredictability of the human body.
Yeah, the medical stories in this broadcast are just wild. Let's look at this mystery virus they were talking about.
Right. So the hosts were detailing this localized epidemic sweeping through spring break crowds in places like Boca Raton and Atlanta, which, by the way, they refer to as Hotlanta.
Of course they do.
Naturally. And people were experiencing these severe symptoms. We're talking 101-degree fevers, extreme gastrointestinal issues, vomiting, and a prolonged loss of taste and smell that could last up to 10 days.
Which, that sounds exactly like COVID, right? Or at least a really severe flu.
Yeah, it is the logical assumption, yeah.
Yeah.
But here's the strange part. Patients were testing completely negative for COVID-19.
Wait, completely negative?
Completely negative. And they were also testing negative for RSV, the flu, strep, pneumonia, everything. The medical system literally couldn't identify what it was.
Wow.
It really highlights a recurring anxiety of that era. The realization that despite all our advanced medical tracking, entirely unidentified pathogens can still just roll through a population unhindered.
Just a total blind spot in the medical radar.
Exactly.
But, okay, as unsettling as that is, it honestly kind of pales in comparison to the vasectomy story from the broadcast.
Oh, it really does.
Yeah.
So one of the individuals discussed on the show went in for what is universally considered a standard, low-risk, routine outpatient procedure.
So, in and out, right?
Supposed to be. But immediately, the system failed. The local anesthesia completely failed to take effect.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, he felt the entire procedure.
Which is just a visceral nightmare all on its own. I can't even imagine.
Right. But the breakdown of his, personal biological map didn't stop there. Once the surgeon actually began the procedure, they discovered highly unexpected anatomical anomalies that hadn't appeared on any previous imaging.
Just hiding there.
Exactly. First, they found an extra reproductive tube.
Okay.
And then, as the medical team investigated further, they found an entirely unexpected, fully formed second kidney.
Which, my first thought is, hey, bonus kidney, great. Maybe I can sell it or donate it.
I wouldn't celebrate just yet, because the medical team quickly realized there was a mysterious mass on that newly discovered kidney.
Oh, wow. That escalated quickly.
Very quickly. So in the span of an hour, this agonizingly painful but routine procedure escalated into a serious ongoing medical investigation into an organ the patient didn't even know he had.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because listening to this, a thought hit me. I know it sounds a little crazy to compare a botched outpatient surgery to, say, gridlock at a major airport, but hear me out.
I'm listening.
We expect the human body to be a known quantity, right? Like this meticulously charted map. But if we can't even predict our own internal anatomy, if our own biological systems have all these hidden malfunctioning surprises, how on earth can we expect our external, massively complex daily infrastructure to work flawlessly?
See, that isn't a crazy leap at all. It's actually exactly the thematic progression of the source material.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the physical infrastructure around these individuals was failing just as spectacularly as their health. The broadcast heavily details absolute travel and transportation nightmares, starting with the Atlanta airport.
Okay, what exactly was happening in Atlanta? Because that airport is always busy, but this sounded different.
It was a total gridlock of the security infrastructure. Traveler landing there experienced absolute paralysis. The TSA lines, the Transportation Security Administration lines, were 4 hours long.
4 hours? Just to get through security?
Yes, 4 hours. And the backlog was so severe that the lines of departing people were snaking out of the security area and wrapping entirely around the baggage carousels.
Wait, so the people trying to leave were blocking the people trying to arrive?
Exactly. It created a physical barrier, preventing arriving passengers from even reaching the belts to claim their luggage. The system didn't just slow down. It cascaded into a complete operational failure for everyone.
But they explicitly contrast that nightmare with Kansas City's airport, right? Which apparently was operating smoothly. Why the difference?
The broadcast notes that Kansas City's airport security had been privatized. So by utilizing a private contractor model rather than the federal TSA model, they managed to bypass the specific labor bottlenecks that were plaguing Atlanta that weekend.
Interesting. But the infrastructure failures weren't just limited to air travel either. They were literally happening in people's driveways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The broadcast details a scenario with personal transportation, a consumer vehicle, specifically a Hyundai. The owner was quoted $2,400 out of pocket for a valve repair because the car was barely past its warranty window.
Ouch. Though I think the manufacturer eventually covered like 95% of it after the dealership lobbied on the owner's behalf, right?
They did, yeah. But the financial fix didn't solve the mechanical reality. The structural failure happened the exact moment the owner drove the supposedly repaired car off the dealership lot.
You're kidding.
Nope. Dashboard warning lights instantly illuminated and the engine began making these deafening, grinding noises. The vehicle had to be turned around immediately. The system was supposed to be expertly repaired, but it failed upon first use.
Man, so we have bodies breaking down, airports completely gridlocked, and cars failing right out of the mechanic's bay. I mean, is this just localized incompetence, like a bad dealership, a poorly run terminal? Or is there a systemic rot happening on a much larger scale?
The source material strongly points to the latter. The broadcast zooms out and the failures scale up dramatically to the global stage.
For instance, they discuss Cuba suffering its third national power grid outage.
A whole nation goes dark. How does that even happen 3 times?
It's a compounding failure of 2 massive systems. The reporting attributes the collapse to critically aging internal infrastructure like decades-old power plants, colliding with a severe immediate fuel shortage.
Ah, okay.
And that fuel shortage is heavily exacerbated by the long-standing United States economic blockade. So you have physical mechanical decay meeting geopolitical economic pressure, and the result is millions of people losing electricity.
Just a total systemic collapse.
Okay.
And then there's the aviation disaster they mentioned in New York, which takes systemic failure and turns into immediate physical tragedy.
Yes, a horrific incident at LaGuardia Airport. An Air Canada regional jet collided with a fire truck directly on the active runway.
Which shouldn't even be possible.
Right. And the physics of an aircraft striking a heavy ground vehicle at those speeds are just devastating. The impact crushed the nose of the aircraft, tragically killing both pilots instantly. But the detail that absolutely stops you in your tracks, the one I mentioned at the very beginning of our deep dive, is about the flight attendant.
It is an unbelievable detail. A flight attendant was strapped into the jump seat directly behind the cockpit. The sheer force of the collision ejected her, still strapped into her seat 300 feet out of the aircraft onto the tarmac.
300 feet? That's a football field.
Literally. And she survived. It's this stark, horrifying reminder of the catastrophic failure of safety protocols. A plane hitting an emergency vehicle on a cleared runway, contrasted with the unpredictable, almost miraculous resilience of human survival.
It's incredible. So we have planes hitting fire trucks, whole countries losing power. Let's talk about the political reality behind all this, because the broadcast mentions a 15-point ceasefire proposal the U.S. sent to Iran. But wait, why are we using Pakistani intermediaries? Why not just talk to them directly to avoid misunderstandings?
Well, that is a crucial question about the mechanics of modern diplomacy. The U.S. and Iran did not have direct formal diplomatic relations. So when two adversarial nations refused to sit at the same table, they used trusted back channels, proxy nations like Pakistan or Switzerland, to pass messages. But as you noted, this indirect communication leads to incredibly tangled messaging.
Because while the U.S. is saying negotiations are happening, Iran is publicly saying the exact opposite.
Precisely. Iran publicly stated they were not engaging in any talks to end the conflict. Furthermore, the broadcast notes Iran was making new, aggressive demands for sovereign control over the Strait of Hormuz.
Which is a massive choke point for global oil, right?
It is one of the most critical maritime choke points in the world. Iran was threatening to charge international vessels a toll for passage. If you suddenly tax a massive percentage of the world's oil supply right at the source, the ripple effects on global inflation and supply chains would be catastrophic.
And domestically, the political climate they describe is just as fraught?
Yes. From a strictly neutral observational standpoint, the broadcast highlights a deeply polarized American landscape in 2026. President Trump was reportedly facing a 36% approval rating compared to a 62% disapproval rating.
Wow.
And we also see cultural battle lines being drawn in federal spaces, such as the administration placing a statue of Christopher Columbus at the Eisenhower Executive Office Building.
Wait, with everything going on, global grid failures, proxy wars, why are they spending time talking about a statue?
Because when massive systemic issues feel too complex or gridlocked to solve, administrations often pivot to symbolic territorial marking.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, placing a controversial historical figure in a prominent federal space is a way of signaling cultural dominance to your political base, even if actual legislative progress is completely stalled. The broadcast also mentions reports of former Representative David Rivera being accused of secretly lobbying for the Venezuelan government.
So a former U.S. representative is secretly working for a foreign government that the U.S. is actively opposing.
Exactly. It highlights the chaotic, behind-the-scenes blurring of foreign policy and personal financial interest. The institutions designed to protect national interests are shown to be highly porous.
So what does this all mean for the average citizen when the macro-level news, like the runway collisions, the proxy wars, the deeply polarized politics, when it's this heavy, are people just tuning out? Like, is it simply too overwhelming to process?
That's a really profound observation, and the source material actually provides a nuanced answer. People don't tune out completely, but they aggressively seek out coping mechanisms. Because the global news is so heavy, humans turn to culture, entertainment, and food for relief and community.
But even in those cultural escapes, the broadcast shows that things are chaotic.
Very much so. Let's look at the music industry story they highlight. It's a brilliant piece of legal irony. The rapper Afroman, who is most famous for his early 2000s hit Because I Got High, won a significant First Amendment legal battle against sheriff's deputies in Ohio.
This story is incredible. Law enforcement raided his home, and he responded by taking the security camera footage of the raid and using it in a satirical music video mocking the deputies. And the deputies turned around and sued him for defamation. But wait, how does he win a defamation suit against the police? If I mock someone publicly and it damages their reputation, isn't that textbook defamation?
Well, in many private cases, yes. But this is where the mechanics of the First Amendment are crucial. Police officers, when acting in their official capacity, are considered state actors or public figures.
Oh, okay.
And the legal bar for a public figure to prove defamation is incredibly high. They have to prove actual malice, meaning the person knew the information was false and published it anyway.
But Afroman just used the actual video footage of them doing their job, so it wasn't false.
Exactly. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation. And furthermore, parody and satire of government officials are fiercely protected forms of free speech. The jury ruled in Afroman's favor because he effectively used the state's own surveillance footage to legally and very creatively push back against state action.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. If Afroman represents this sort of grassroots creative victory, the broadcast's discussion of network television shows corporate media completely losing its compass.
Definitely.
Let's talk about the reality show, The Bachelorette.
Yeah, the television landscape in 2026 was clearly shifting its priorities in a drastic way. ABC had to completely cancel a highly anticipated season of The Bachelorette before it even aired because of who they cast as the lead. Taylor Frankie Paul, a massive TikTok star.
Right.
Shortly after casting her, violent video footage surfaced of her engaging in a physical altercation, throwing objects, and kicking a former boyfriend in the presence of a child, an incident that had previously led to an arrest.
But wait, hasn't reality TV always been about casting the most dramatic, unhinged people? I mean, look at early MTV or the height of reality TV 20 years ago. Why is casting a controversial TikTok star any different?
That is a great distinction to make. In the past, networks did cast dramatic people, but they were carefully vetted by casting departments to ensure they fit a specific, produced narrative without crossing certain legal or safety liability lines.
It was like curated chaos.
Exactly, curated chaos.
Right.
What the source highlights here is a shift to algorithmic clout chasing. The network bypassed traditional vetting because Taylor Frankie Paul came with millions of prepackaged followers.
So network executives traded basic safety and background checks for built-in algorithmic engagement, and it just blew up in their faces.
Precisely. Corporate entertainment is stumbling, chasing internet metrics over substance or safety. But inversely, the source shows that genuine word-of-mouth community culture is thriving right where corporate media fails.
The food culture anecdotes in the broadcast were honestly some of the best parts.
They offer such a great contrast. While multi-million-dollar TV shows are imploding, a small African restaurant in Kansas City is booming with business. And it wasn't because of a corporate marketing campaign.
Right.
It was because a local window cleaner who cleans storefronts for small businesses for free promoted their peanut butter soup, African wings, and handmade mango lemonade to his local Instagram following.
It's the ultimate grassroots win. That's genuine community support. Oh, and the hosts even dropped a local insider tip for Gates BBQ in Kansas City, right?
A fantastic cultural nugget for you, the listener. If you order fries at Gates BBQ, you have to ask for them crispy. They will actually take the fries out of the bin and double fry them specifically for your order.
That sounds amazing.
It's a tiny detail, but it shows how people find joy and connection in hyper-local shared knowledge when the macro world feels totally out of control.
Which brings us to the final area of the broadcast. Because when politics, travel, and media feel fundamentally broken, human beings crave a system where rules actually apply and strategy is rewarded. And for the hosts of this show, that sanctuary was professional football.
Specifically, the tactical restructuring of the Kansas City Chiefs. The broadcast featured a deep dive into the Chiefs' offseason moves, and it serves as a fascinating study in strategic evolution. The marquee move they discussed was signing running back Kenneth Walker III, who was coming off a Super Bowl MVP performance with the Seattle Seahawks.
But the hosts point out it's not just about getting a star player, right? It's about changing the entire geometry of the offense.
The tactical shift here is crucial. The broadcast details that the Chiefs are reportedly moving away from operating purely out of the shotgun formation. Instead, they're shifting to more under-center, two tight end sets.
Okay, for the casual fan, explain why simply moving the quarterback under center changes the geometry of the game so dramatically.
Sure. So when a quarterback is in the shotgun, he is standing several yards back, and the running back is standing right next to him.
Okay.
When the ball is handed off, the running back is starting from a standstill. He has to accelerate from zero. But when the quarterback is directly under the center, the running back is positioned much deeper in the backfield.
So he gets a literal running start.
Exactly. He gets ahead of steam before he even takes the handoff. This allows him to read the offensive line blocks as they develop and hit the gap with established downhill momentum, which makes it incredibly difficult for defenders to stop him for a loss.
And establishing that punishing downhill run game sets up a secondary benefit, right?
A massive secondary benefit. When a defense is getting battered by a downhill running attack, their linebackers inevitably have to step forward to stop it.
Right. They have to commit.
And the moment those linebackers step up, they leave the middle of the field open. The Chiefs can then execute devastating play-action passes right into that newly vacated space.
Which perfectly protects their two most valuable assets.
Yes. This entire tactical shift is designed as risk mitigation. It takes the physical pressure off an aging Travis Kelce, who the source notes just signed a 3-year, $54 million deal, because he can find softer coverage over the middle.
Makes sense.
And it protects a recuperating Patrick Mahomes by balancing the offensive workload so he doesn't have to throw the ball 50 times a game.
It's like a major corporation restructuring its entire daily workflow from the ground up. just to maximize the efficiency and protect the health of its star CEO.
That is a very solid analogy.
Yeah.
Though I'd add that in football, the competitors are actively trying to physically dismantle your CEO every Sunday, which makes the strategic shift even more urgent.
Fair point.
And the source notes they still have draft needs to execute this vision. They traded away key secondary players like McDuffie and Watson, so they need cornerbacks.
Right.
And they were targeting aggressive defensive linemen, looking at players like Texas Tech's David Bailey or Reuben Bain, who the host note was dominant in college despite criticisms from scouts about his short arms. They were looking past aesthetic metrics to find functional production.
It's just brilliant strategic order in a world that feels incredibly disordered. So let's pull all of this together. We started with a single, messy, comedic radio show from a random Sunday in March 2026.
And by actively sifting through the jokes and the casual banter, we extracted a remarkably vivid snapshot of an era, a world grappling with unidentified viruses and failing anesthetics, a society deeply frustrated by crumbling infrastructure, from airport security gridlocks to consumer cars and national power grids collapsing.
We saw the tension of global geopolitics, proxy diplomacy, and symbolic statues, and the irony of our cultural coping mechanisms. We saw a world where corporate reality TV chases TikTok clout into a brick wall, but a local window cleaner can save a neighborhood restaurant through word of mouth. And finally, we saw the brilliant, calculated evolution of a football dynasty adapting its very geometry to protect its core.
It serves as a powerful reminder for you, the listener. The information age can often feel like a fire hose of chaos. It's loud, it's disorganized, and it's frequently overwhelming.
Yeah, it really is.
But if you practice active listening and take the time to connect the dots and ask why things are happening, just as we did today, you can turn that chaotic noise into highly valuable, factual knowledge.
I love that, turning noise into knowledge. We're going to leave you with one final thought today. Think back to that time capsule metaphor we started with. If a single chaotic comedy radio show from a random Sunday inadvertently captured the exact medical anxieties, geopolitical tensions, media shifts, and tactical hopes of its specific time... captured the exact hopes of its specific time. What will the audio archives of your casual everyday conversations tell historians about the reality of our world 50 years from now?